Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Juggernaut, and today I'm going to talk to you about a topic that some people, I might even go so far as saying, will find enlightening in some respect, but also should be a fairly interesting topic of conversation for everyone here. What is it? Namely, if you can't tell by the title, I'm going to talk to you about my experience with game developers. And because this is going to be probably a fairly lengthy conversation, I'll give you a TLDR of what I will talk about in a more in-depth way, I suppose, later down in the video. So, essentially, there's a stereotype going on that indie developers and small development teams care a lot more about their consumers and the people that actually play their games. While certainly true, this by no means is the rule, and there are plenty of either AAA developers or, massive development companies that sell hundreds of thousands of copies of their games and yet care about, I dare say, almost each and every one of their players and their fans. And equally on the opposite side of the coin, there are indie developers that just try and sell as many copies as they can, and then GTFO, not really taking any community feedback. Well, this might sound obvious to you. I would like to point out later down in the video some personal examples that I've encountered, and some oddly, quite honestly, puzzling situations that happened to me, but more on that later. So, as I said, the size of the development team and their budget and the number of copies that they sell is by no means indicative of how much they care for a game. Oddly enough, neither is the quality of a game. I mean, think about it. Nobody wants to make a bad movie, and yet bad movies get made. Nobody wants to make a bad video game that, most people don't like, and yet these games do get made. Companies that do make these games, in my experience, very often do care about their audience and do want to try, honestly, to make a good experience for all their players, and not just to sell more copies, but to genuinely entertain them and provide them with a good product. And yet, as I said, bad games do get made. However, the point of this entire video that I'm trying to make is that if you do see a bad game, a game you dislike, maybe even a controversial game, it does not mean that the development team is bad. In fact, in my experience, quite often it means quite the opposite, that the development team has good intentions but were unable to execute what they wanted or were limited by other factors somewhere down the line. That would basically be the TLDR, I suppose. I'm going to give you some more, concrete and exact examples and stuff like that in the remainder of the video for those of you that want to watch the entire thing. I'll try and keep it as brief as I can. So, I'm going to start off with some of my personal experiences. I'm going to name Paradox here, and I feel like this is a sort of like an endorsement for them. Maybe that's too strong of a word, but absolutely. Paradox is a huge development company. I mean, there are obviously a lot bigger ones, for sure, but they are by no means an indie company. And they make, according to many, and I share this opinion as well, probably the best grand strategy games. Now, yes, they have delved into a few other genres as well, and have had varying degrees of success, but one thing remains a constant in my experience. That is that they genuinely do care about what the players think. And yes, I know there's a running joke about Paradox DLCs and how they make a game that costs X amount of money and then 5 times that money is the total cost of DLC and so on and so forth. It's there is some truth to it, but regardless of that fact, it's more of a running joke. I think people really honestly do appreciate everything that Paradox does on a objective level, let's say. So what about Paradox? Well, here's the thing. Both as a part of my hobby and what's basically been a job for the last 2 months, YouTube, I've had, in sort of that sphere, I had the opportunity to talk with them and to contact them and to, I'd say, in a way, work with them as well, right? So on that sort of, I guess, professional level, if you will, even though this YouTube is more like a hobby for me, but anyways, on that level, they have been amazing. I mean, they have responded to my emails, they have engaged in conversation with me, which is more than what could be said for a lot of game developers, both AAA and indie. Indeed, they have always been fair and correct towards me and other YouTubers I know, both larger and smaller. And they've always, and yes, they have I realize that they have a support team for this entire thing, but that doesn't quite change anything. And I'll talk about why in the towards the well, probably towards the end of the video. But for now, let me just say that every time I message them, as from this professional standpoint, that they have responded, they have been very fair, very correct. And as a user, you know, before this entire business part, shall we say, and I hesitate to call it a business, but you know, I suppose you understand what I mean. As just as a regular user, as anyone else, as any other player that in their player base, I've always been treated fair, correctly, and I have nothing negative to say about their attitudes towards the player base and the fans, and their consumers, if you will. I've never had a negative experience with Paradox. And they're a huge development company, and in my experience, they do genuinely look for community feedback on how to make their games better. And not just new ones, the ones that they've already released. Which, for anyone, I believe, that has played Paradox games for a fairly lengthy amount of time, this is rather obvious. Paradox does not exactly easily abandon their games. I mean, take a look at CK2, that thing has been patched and patched again and updated for all eternity now, and fair enough, it's not that old of a game, but they do constantly look for ways to improve them. Whether it be with free updates, DLC, doesn't matter. They look for community feedback and act upon that. However, shall we say, in the flip side of the coin, I also had I don't want to call it displeasure, but the opportunity to contact one or two indie developers. I shall not name any names for fairly obvious reasons that you will hear in a few minutes' time, I believe. These were very small development teams. Very small development teams with very limited amount of backers or I guess, people interested at the time in their game, shall we say. Like I said, I'm not going to tell you who this is, and I'm not going to provide any numbers, but let's say that my total amount of subscribers, which is, you can probably see it down there, equal to about 15, 10, 20%. Let's say like 12%. Let's pick a nice number in between all that. 12% of their total supporters, shall we say, at the time. And I've contacted them. These proverbial, though quite real, indie developers, and well, I've been ignored. And someone's going to say, "Oh, he's been ignored, and now he's pissed off at them." No, I have no problem whatsoever being ignored by indie developers and by all developers of all sorts of video games and by all sorts of people. It's quite fine. It is to be expected if you have any limited experience in this field known as YouTube. It is quite to be expected. It's not that. It's that I find it puzzling that they refuse to talk with people. And not just myself. Again, this is just, like I said, my personal experience, but I've seen this happen to others, to fans, to YouTubers alike. These practically, I dare say, miniature development teams have gigantic egos and refuse to talk to anyone and anything that's not a multi-million-dollar company. I find this puzzling, to say the least. Small teams, big egos, as I've written down here in the script for this video. And it really does get the message across. And I like to hesitate. I like to hesitate. No, I hasten to add, this is not because of something that happened to me. Like I said, I ignored 2 game developers that sent me free copies of their games. I just never got around to doing reviews for those games. I just never got around to playing them. Hell, one of those emails I saw today. It wasn't an email, it was a message on YouTube, but I saw it today. And I feel horrible for not responding to that email or whatever when it was sent several months ago, but, you know, it was my fault for not seeing it. I didn't consciously ignore them. Fair enough. However, that's exactly the thing. There are people out there developers out there that consciously ignore their fans, consciously ignore their... I say supporters, that people that are interested in their games consciously ignore them. And for some reason, I mean, it is the reality. For AAA developers, it's less of a oddity, shall we say. It's somewhat more understandable and acceptable. Not really acceptable in that way, but you are not exactly, you know, shocked at these news when you hear a AAA developer refuse to talk to, or refuse to take feedback, or refuse to give out review copies and stuff like that. And the devil lies exactly there. If you refuse to let people promote your game, if you refuse to let people do reviews of your game, hell, even Let's Plays, though that is a bit controversial, do first impressions of your games, you're shooting yourself in the foot. And some might say, well, yeah, you said it, they're shooting themselves in the foot, you know, no need to talk about this anymore. Except that there is more depth to this than might, you know, than you might initially think. Reason being, if you don't put out a review, a first impressions video, either video or written review, that is, if you don't put this information out there, then ultimately the people buying the game have a lot less information to make their decisions based on, right? Which means you can, pardon the language, screw them over quite a lot. Which is a problem. Same goes for interviews. If you don't do interviews with developers and see where the game's going to go and which direction it's going to take, then there's less to be excited about, right? If you simply don't know a lot about the game, and obviously there are some exceptions to this, where the less you know, the more hyped you sort of get, because you fill in the blanks in your head. Fair enough, but in I say, the majority of situations, if you don't know anything about a game, you don't quite get excited about it, do you? And this is the problem, that these very small development teams with several thousand people interested in their game at the time refuse to talk to YouTubers, refuse to talk to games journalists that are not massively popular. I mean, I believe we've gotten to the point where no single indie developer alive, if he has a pair of brain cells, will reject a review or a WTF is from Total Biscuit. Total Biscuit doesn't do reviews. Let's say Angry Joe, right? A review from Angry Joe or a WTF from WTF is from Total Biscuit, or hell, even a Let's Look At from Northern Lion. But these are massive YouTubers, and there's only so much games that they can cover. And in fact, I'd like to point out a video presentation that the Egg Scum himself, Northern Lion, did. I seriously, I have huge respect for that man. In which he talked to the games developers of various very small indie teams and said, yo, well, he didn't say yo, but you know, in this tone, get your games out there to YouTubers and to people. And not just the massive YouTubers with like 5 million subscribers, plus get them to small YouTubers, because if you search up The Binding of Isaac, there are hundreds of thousands of results for that game that are all related to the game. Let's Plays, edits, funny moments, synergies, tutorials, everything. And this gets the game out there. You know, and you know, there's a reason The Binding of Isaac is so popular. Speaking of which, the game in the background, Binding of Isaac, Afterbirth. But, you know, and it's somewhat puzzling to see that developers refuse to do this. Because then you have to ask yourself the question, well, Why? Do you not trust that a YouTuber with, I don't know, less than X amount of views and X amount of subscribers can do a good video and it can do the game justice? Because that's oh god, that is wrong. Oh god, that is wrong. Your popularity on YouTube has, well, not nothing to do, but has limited things to do with the quality of the content you produce. I mean, take a look at some of those most popular YouTubers out there, and they mostly produce non-content, as the Biscuit would call it. Basically, okay, I hesitate to take anyone's name now and then to point them out as an example, but Gassy Mexican Cnanas, some of the most popular YouTubers out there, what do? They don't produce, reviews. They don't produce something that a indie developer would be interested in initially, necessarily off the get-go, right? The people have fun with their friends in multiplayer games, and they are highly entertaining, and this is quality content from an entertainment perspective, but not from a sort of review, more down in depth, in detail, video videos, yes. They're not exactly, objective looks and reviews at things, such as video games from either indie or AAA, right? They don't exactly produce that kind of content. They're producing content that's in an entirely different sphere, which, for games developers, obviously, if one of those YouTubers plays their game, then that's a huge boost to sales and all that, of course, but that doesn't mean that that they are the only ones that can produce quality content for your game. That doesn't mean that a smaller YouTuber with, let's say, 10,000 or 50,000 subscribers, or even less, can make a really high-quality video doing the game justice and pointing out everything that's both good and bad about your game. And I go as far as saying a lot of smaller YouTubers, perhaps myself included, though I try not to, will be a lot more lenient on the game and will be a lot less harsh on the game if they are, if the developers talk to them and go, oh, could you do a video about our game? Or if the YouTuber himself approaches the developers and says, I would like a review copy, and he's given that review copy, I'd say that a lot of the, hobby, shall we say, YouTubers that do this as a hobby will be a lot more forgiving to the game, and sometimes it is okay, sometimes it is perhaps even preferable, due to the fact that all these massive YouTubers go through dozens of games each month, and they have, let's say, in a lot of situations, a lower tolerance for mistakes, for bugs, for unfinished or bad game concepts. Which, again, is not bad in and of its own right, to have a high standard, but I think a happy medium between the two is also acceptable, and it's just a different opinion that you get to hear, and it really is that the consumers have only to gain from this. If you hear various opinions on this fact, and if they are made with good arguments and good reason and good proof and good evidence, then there is no reason to not go forth and give people with less than several million subscribers review copies, and sure enough, this happens. A lot. Quite a lot, in fact. Whilst we're on the topic, the number of views on a video does not indicate the quality of said video. In fact, it sometimes, not always, sometimes, every now and again, has nothing to do with the quality of the content. You can make the best video on YouTube, but if it doesn't get, shall we say, shared enough, if you don't promote it quite enough, if you don't spam your links all over everywhere, and then it'll get like 20 views, and it'll stay forever hidden to, figuratively speaking, everyone on YouTube, right? And it could be the best video out there. If you haven't written the proper tags, if you haven't done the proper promoting, it's just not going to work. Same goes for these reviews, same goes for these first impressions, same goes for these early copies that you do or do not get. With that said, I find it, like I said, puzzling that these game developers would actively go out of their way to ignore YouTubers such as myself and only shoot for the stars that are the top 1% of the top 1% of YouTube. So, with that said, I'd like to also point out, like I said in the TLDR part of this video, bad games do not equal bad developers. And I think that's sort of the point that I'm trying to make here, that if you do see a game that's, you know, not up to the quality standard that you were expecting, or not as entertaining, or not as good, not as well executed as you might have hoped or as you might have expected, then obviously don't go out of your way to assume that the developer meant this to happen and did this on purpose, I would say, because there are people that do that, and that's most certainly wrong in, you know, I would say in most situations. Not all, of course, I can't. It's impossible to make such a statement. There are exceptions to every single thing out there, and probably every single thing said in this video, but yeah. I think I should draw this video towards an end, because my throat's drying up and I think I've said quite enough on the topic. Tell me what you think. Tell me what your experiences have been, and have you ever been sort of gravely disappointed or very pleasantly surprised by a certain development team or something like that. So, yeah, don't go out of your way to go as far as, I don't know, some people even go as far as boycotting games developers for making a bad game that you didn't like but paid for. It's quite often the case, not what they wanted. Quite the opposite, in fact, and what they did and what they wanted are two different things, but don't blame the developers on a personal level. Criticize their work, tell them how to improve it, but don't go out of your way to hate them or witch hunt them or whatever, or to boycott them for what they've done. Because ultimately, whilst, yes, you may have been, I don't want to say damaged, but you may have been, how do I put this? You may have been at a loss, because you spent the money on a game you were disappointed by. You know, still, it's, don't take it personally, shall we say, and, do not blame them on a personal level for what they've done, or haven't done. Anyways, that was sort of the point of my video. Thank you very much for watching if you're still here, and have the willpower to listen to me ramble through all that. My name is Juggernaut, and thank you, as I said, thank you very much for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe down below if you enjoyed this video and want to support the channel, and stay tuned with the content that I produce here. Until next time, take care, and bye-bye.